Stop for just a moment, because what you are about to hear may touch a place many parents keep hidden behind a polite smile. There comes a time after 60, sometimes after 70, when the phone no longer feels like connection. It feels like a summons. It rings, and before you even see the name, your body already knows what may be waiting. Another problem. Another request. Another complaint. Another emergency that somehow becomes yours to solve. Another conversation where you are expected to listen patiently, give money quietly, forgive quickly, and pretend that your own peace does not matter. I still never imagined I would become the kind of parent who stopped answering my children's calls. For most of my life, I believed a parent should always pick up. Morning, night, tired, sick, worried, busy, it did not matter. If one of my children called, I answered. I answered because I loved them. I answered because I remembered them small. I answered because the sound of their voice still touched the oldest and softest part of my heart. Even when they were grown, even when they had families of their own, some part of me still believed they needed me in the same innocent way they once did. But age reveals what love sometimes hides. It shows you the difference between being loved and being used. It shows you the difference between being respected and being available. It shows you that the people closest to your heart can become careless with it because they assume it will always remain open, no matter how often they enter without gratitude. No parent wants to say, "My child drains me." No parent wants to confess that a call from their own son or daughter can bring anxiety instead of joy. We say we are fine. We say they are just stressed. We say this is what family means. But deep down, the body keeps the truth. At first, I did not stop answering. I simply began to hesitate. The phone would ring, and I would stare at it for a few seconds longer than before. In that pause, years of patterns would pass through me. I remembered the times they called only when they needed money. The times they spoke with irritation because I asked a simple question. The times they unloaded their anger, then disappeared once they felt better. The times they made me feel guilty for having limits. The times I gave advice they ignored, only to be blamed later for not helping enough. There were good calls too, and that is what made it confusing. Sometimes they asked about my health. Sometimes they laughed with me. Sometimes they sounded like the children I missed. A parent can survive on small tenderness for a long time. One kind sentence can make you excuse months of neglect. One warm visit can make you forget the coldness that came before it. The heart of a parent is loyal beyond reason. It keeps searching for evidence that everything is still all right. The first reason I stopped answering immediately was that every call had begun to control my nervous system. I could be drinking tea, reading quietly, sitting near the window, or preparing for sleep, and the ring would pull me into someone else's storm. My chest tightened. My mind prepared explanations. My stomach felt heavy. Before I even answered, I was already bracing myself. Would they be angry? Would they ask for something? Would they question my memory, my choices, my money, my time? Would I end the call feeling loved, or would I sit afterward in silence, feeling smaller inside my own home? This is when I understood that peace is not only about what happens during a conversation. It is also about what happens before and after it. If a person's call steals your calm before you answer and leaves you unsettled after you hang up, then the call is not simple communication anymore. It has become emotional weather. And after a certain age, you cannot afford to let other people's weather decide the temperature of your soul. The second reason was that my children had learned to treat my availability as a promise I never made. Because I had always answered, they assumed I always would. Because I had always listened, they assumed I had endless room for their pain. Because I had always helped, they assumed my time, savings, advice, and attention were family property. They did not always say this directly. They did not need to. Expectation often speaks through tone. Through surprise when you say no. Through irritation when you take time to respond. Through silence used as punishment when you refuse to solve what they created. I began to see that answering every call was teaching them something. It was teaching them that my peace could be interrupted at any hour. It was teaching them that their urgency outranked my rest. It was teaching them that I would absorb their moods without requiring respect. It was teaching them that I was still the old parent, the one who rushed, fixed, apologized, sacrificed, and swallowed the hurt afterward. I loved my children, but I had to admit that my constant availability had helped build a pattern that was now hurting me. The third reason was guilt. Not their guilt. Mine. Every time I considered not answering, guilt rose like an old master. What if something is wrong? What if they need me? What if they think I do not love them? What if I am becoming selfish? What if a good parent should always be there? Guilt knows the language of parenthood very well. It can take love and twist it into fear. It can make rest feel cruel. It can make boundaries feel like abandonment. It can make a 70-year-old parent feel like they are failing a 40-year-old child. But then I asked myself something that changed me. If my children truly needed emergency help, would not a message come? Would they not call again? Would they not contact someone else? Must I really surrender every peaceful moment because of what might be happening? I realized I was living under the rule of imagined emergencies. Most calls were not emergencies. They were complaints, requests, impulses, frustrations, or conversations that could wait. Yet I treated every ring like a fire alarm. The fourth reason I stopped answering immediately was that I needed to hear my own life again. This may sound strange, but after decades of parenthood, many mothers and fathers forget the sound of their own inner voice. They become trained to respond. A child cries, they respond. A school calls, they respond. A bill arrives, they respond. A teenager rebels, they respond. An adult child struggles, they respond. Response becomes identity. Then, one day, the house is quiet, and the phone becomes the last rope pulling them back into the old role. If they do not answer, they feel useless. If they answer, they feel exhausted. I had to learn that my life was not empty simply because I was not constantly needed. I had to learn that a quiet afternoon belonged to me. My walk belonged to me. My meal belonged to me. My prayer belonged to me. My sleep belonged to me. My remaining years belonged to me. So I began with one small act. I let the phone ring. The first time, my hands trembled. I watched the screen until it went dark. Then I sat there feeling like I had committed a crime. Nothing terrible happened. A message came 20 minutes later. It was not an emergency. It was a complaint about something I could not control. I answered later, when I was calm. That one delay taught me more than 100 arguments. I learned that I could respond without being instantly available. I learned that a call could wait without love disappearing. I learned that my peace did not have to be sacrificed to prove I cared. At first, my children did not understand. One said, "Why did you not pick up?" Another said, "I was worried." Another sounded offended, as if I had broken a family law. The old me would have apologized for being unavailable. The new me said, "I was resting." Or, "I call back when I am able." Or, "If it is urgent, please leave a clear message." They were the first words of a parent who was no longer willing to live on command. But relief came because my nervous system finally began to understand that I had a choice. I could choose the hour, the tone, the energy, and the conditions under which I communicated. This is where Stoic wisdom became real to me. We cannot control who calls. We cannot control whether they approve of our boundaries. We cannot control whether adult children mature, apologize, listen, or change. But we can control whether we answer from fear or from calm. We can control whether we reward disrespect with immediate access. We can control whether our final years are spent as servants to the ringtone or guardians of our own peace. The fifth reason I stopped answering was that I needed to separate love from rescue. For many years, I confused the two. If they were angry, I thought I had to absorb it until they felt lighter. But rescue can become a habit that weakens everyone involved. It teaches the child that someone else will carry consequences. It teaches the parent that peace must be earned by solving problems. It turns love into a transaction where the parent pays with emotional energy. Adult children need love, but they also need responsibility. They need to know that their emotions are theirs to manage, their choices are theirs to face, their homes are theirs to organize, their finances are theirs to plan, and their conflicts are not automatically your assignments. You can offer wisdom. You can offer care. You can offer prayer, encouragement, and occasional help. But you cannot live their lives for them without losing your own. When I stopped answering every call, something interesting happened. Some calls became messages. Some issues were solved without me. Some anger cooled before we spoke. Some requests disappeared because they were never truly necessary. And some conversations became more respectful because they no longer began with the assumption that I was waiting beside the phone. My delayed answer created space. Space taught them that I was not refusing love. I was refusing to be consumed. Of course, not every child responded well. One became distant for a while. Another tried to make me feel guilty. A parent's heart does not become stone simply because it becomes wise. I wondered if peace was costing me closeness. But then I asked myself, what kind of closeness requires me to abandon myself? What kind of love depends on immediate access? What kind of family bond collapses because an older parent says, "I will call you back when I am rested"? If a relationship cannot survive a boundary, then the boundary did not destroy it. The boundary revealed its weakness. I also had to face my own need to be needed. This was the most honest and painful part. I liked being the one they called. Even when it exhausted me, it made me feel important. It reminded me of years when my role was clear. Parent. Protector. Provider. Listener. Safe place. If I kept answering every call only to feel necessary, then I was not only being used. I was participating in my own exhaustion. I had to find worth beyond being needed. That is not easy after a lifetime of service. Peace came slowly. It did not arrive like a celebration. It arrived like a softer breath. I began sleeping better. I stopped carrying my phone from room to room. I stopped feeling guilty for turning it down during meals, prayer, walks, or rest. I began calling my children when I could be fully present, not when I was anxious and interrupted. I listened better because I was no longer listening from resentment. I spoke more clearly because I was no longer afraid of every reaction. When you stop giving from pressure, the giving that remains becomes cleaner. When you stop answering from fear, the calls you choose to return become more peaceful. When you stop rescuing automatically, your advice becomes less desperate and more dignified. Boundaries do not close the heart. They protect it from being handled carelessly. If you are a parent listening to this, I am not telling you to ignore your children in real need. I am not telling you to punish them with silence. I am not telling you to become unreachable, cruel, or proud. If there is true danger, illness, crisis, or urgent need, love may require action. But most of what drains aging parents is not true emergency. It is repeated emotional dependency, entitlement, poor timing, disrespectful tone, financial pressure, and the assumption that a parent's peace is less important than an adult child's convenience. You can create rules that fit your life. Maybe you do not answer after 8 at night unless it is urgent. Maybe you return calls once a day. Maybe you ask for messages first. Maybe you keep one child from using you as a dumping ground for complaints about another. Maybe you stop answering calls that begin with shouting. Maybe you say, "I want to speak with you when we can both be calm." Expect guilt. Expect resistance. Expect the old habit to pull at you. The first few times you do not answer, you may feel like a bad parent. Sit with that feeling without obeying it immediately. Guilt may simply be the sound of an old pattern losing power. Fear may be the echo of years spent believing love must always be immediate. Let the emotion pass. Then choose with wisdom. If your children ask why you changed, you do not need a long defense. You can say, "I am learning to protect my peace. I will always love you, but I cannot be instantly available for every call. If something is urgent, leave a message, and I will respond as soon as I can." People who respect you may adjust. People who only respected your usefulness may protest. The deeper transformation is not only about the phone. It represents access, control, habit, guilt, duty, identity, and love mixed with fear. When you stop answering automatically, you are not only changing a communication habit. You are reclaiming the right to decide when and how your heart opens. You are telling your children, and yourself, that age does not make you less deserving of peace. You are still a person with a nervous system, a schedule, a body, a soul, and a limited number of mornings left. Here at Stoic Beacon, we believe that peace in later life is not selfish. It is sacred. You have carried enough problems that were not fully yours. You have explained enough, rescued enough, worried enough, and answered enough calls with a tired smile. Now it is time to love with wisdom. Love that listens without being consumed. Love that helps without becoming controlled. Love that answers when it can be present, not because guilt cracked the whip. One day, your children may understand. Maybe they will only understand when they become older themselves and feel the weight of a ringing phone against a tired heart. But your peace cannot wait for their understanding. It must begin with your own courage. A parent is not meant to remain permanently on call until the final breath. A parent is allowed to become human again. So if the phone rings today and your body tightens, pause. Ask yourself, is this a true emergency, or is this my old fear asking me to obey? Am I answering from love, or from guilt? Do I have the energy to speak with dignity right now? Can this wait until I am calm? It can return the phone to its proper place. A tool for connection, not a chain around your peace. And when you do call back, speak from steadiness. Listen, but do not absorb everything. Care, but do not carry everything. Offer wisdom, but do not chase obedience. Say yes when yes is honest. Say no when no protects your spirit. Let your children learn that your love remains, but your unlimited availability has ended. I stopped answering my children's calls immediately, and I finally found peace because I stopped treating every ring like a command. I stopped confusing urgency with love. I stopped letting guilt sit in the driver's seat of my old age. I stopped proving my devotion by abandoning my quiet. And in that space, I discovered something I wish I had known earlier. The children who truly love you do not need instant access to respect your heart. They need to learn that your peace is part of your life too. Thank you for spending this time with Stoic Beacon. May you love your children deeply without losing yourself completely. May your phone become a doorway you open with wisdom, not a bell that controls your spirit. May your final years be filled with calm conversations, respectful boundaries, and the quiet strength to remember that being a parent does not mean being endlessly available. It means loving with a heart that is finally wise enough to protect its own peace.